Right, it's 2 o'clock, so good afternoon, members, good afternoon, officers, good afternoon, invited guests, good afternoon, members of the public, to the South Hams District Council Overview and Scrutiny Committee meeting. So we will go straight onto the agenda, and item 1, which is apologies. Mr. White.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members. We've got an apology from Councillor Austin, for whom Councillor Foss is substituting. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Item 2, minutes. To approve as a correct record the minutes of the committee held 29th September 2022. Members, you've all seen these. Anyone have any questions, comments, or can I have them as moved? Moved. Thank you very much. Yeah. General assent. Okay. Thank you very much. Item 3, urgent business brought forward. I have no urgent business to bring forward. Item 4, division of the agenda. There's no reason to divide the agenda. Item 5, declarations of interest. In accordance with the Code of Conduct, members are invited to declare any disclosable pecuniary interests, other registrable interests and non-registrable interests, including the nature and extent of such interests they may have in any items to be considered at this meeting. No, none there, Mr. White. Okay, in which case we will go on to item 6, public forum. Do we have anything there?
Nothing received, Chair.
Thank you very much. Well, in which case we will go straight on then to item 7, which is Devon Building Control Partnership. Mr. Nigel Hunt, introduced by Councillor Bastone. Over to you, Councillor Bastone.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. It's my pleasure to introduce to you Nigel Hunt, who is the Head of Building Control at Devon Building Control and Partnership. Myself and Councillor Birch are the two representatives from this council on that building control partnership, and it's Nigel is relatively new. What, you've been with us 12 months?
18 months.
18 months, but he's got into the job and he's doing a great job. But I'll let Nigel explain the report, or if you've got questions for him, of course, he'd be pleased to answer them. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Hilary. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. I thought the first thing I'd do is give a little bit of background of myself. I'm a building control professional. I came into building control in 1982. Whilst running building control at Mendip District Council, I was also deputy director who took on private sector housing and heritage conservation. I was asked to do work in 2014 for a Somerset Building Control Partnership, which came into force in 2016. I managed that partnership until 18 months ago when I came to Devon Building Control Partnership. With regard to the partnership, we are hosted by Teignbridge District Council for terms and conditions. Now, my view is that I manage building control on behalf of all three councils. And that's what I've tried to do. I think that was lacking to a degree before I came in. So part of my moving forward was to set up a strategy board, which consists of Drew and my director at Teignbridge and myself and accountants. And that's how we run the business. And then we sit under a joint committee where every council has 2 members. And that's where we decide strategy and how we provide the service. The main function of the partnership is to ensure that all the councils can meet their statutory and regulatory duties in respect of building control in a timely manner. It is a statutory service, and it's also a service of last resort. So it does mean that we are not able to refuse work. So during the process of what we do, it should be noted that we're actually in a competitive marketplace as well. There are private providers that provide the same service, so we have to be competitive on price. We have to make sure that we provide the levels of service that people expect, but also not be compromised by that, because we take pride in our profession, but we also take pride that we are a public service. I think that stands for a lot. We have got a very good reputation, and I think that does link into yourselves as partner councils as well. And hopefully what we try to do is enforce that by doing things like award ceremonies, we do training and that sort of thing. We're pleased to announce that this year we've got 4 finalists at the national awards as a partnership, and the team have actually been nominated for Local Authority Building Control Team of the Year. The service, as it stands, has 2 elements to it. They're described as fee earning and non-fee earning. The building regulation aspect of the service is income generated, and currently we need to generate over 80% of our costs, and that's from fee earning. And that has to be in accordance with the local authority charges regulations and SIPFA accounting requirements. This needs to be self-financed over a period of time. So what we do is sort of ensure that all of your building construction work that we actually have an application for, which could be anything from installation of a new window through to building of an extension, to new houses, to pretty much anything, tower blocks. We have the skills, we have the knowledge to do that. They are income generating. The other part of the service is non-fee earning, and that is where your contribution comes into the service. So currently, between the 3 councils, you contribute 20% of our running costs. Now, the non-fee earning work itself will cover dangerous structures. It will cover enforcement of building regulations with regard to unauthorised works, demolitions, registering of initial notices and competent person schemes, disabled persons applications, and also general knowledge to members of the public, general information to members of the public. That's where we are now. Moving forward, I think the main part of our agenda is to sort of link up with all of your authorities with regard to climate change and the climate emergency. One thing I think is important is to understand that whilst you all as councils will have conditions that you may set with regard to housing development, you don't have anybody else that actually does that. So every time we go on site to look at an application, we make sure that they not only comply to the regulations as they stand, but also any requirements that you may place on a development with regard to emissions, climate change, etc. I think that's a broad coverage of what we do and how we do it. I'm happy to answer any questions if anybody's got one.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Any questions, members? Councillor McKay.
Sorry, I've got a bit of a cough, so excuse me. Yeah, you may recall that you and I had a bit of an exchange of emails with regard to Baltic Way about 18 months ago-ish. And one of my questions that comes out of that is the enforcement aspect of it, because my understanding is that you don't have any enforcement powers. That belongs to the local planning authority, and so when you do need to enforce, you need to refer it back to the LPA. And one of my questions about what happened at Baltic Way was that you did identify in what you said back to me that there had been lots of breaches. And that Bloor Homes would be made aware of these breaches, but nothing was ever done about it, and it was never referred back to the local authority to enforce or pursue in any way, shape, or form. So I'm just intrigued as to have procedures changed, and what are the obligations with regard to enforcement?
We can only enforce if there's a fundamental failure of the regulations. We can't enforce on poor workmanship and things like that. That's one of the biggest issues that we have. So a lot of what happened at Baltic Wolf was poor workmanship. That was one of the major issues there. What we need to do with that is to sort of do a thorough review and look at the failure of building regulations. There's also a issue if approved inspectors are involved, because in theory we can't actually attend that site if they're carrying on that work and they're doing the work themselves. Local authorities can't get involved in that unless after the event, as I say, issues are raised, and there's a fundamental failure of a regulation. A lot of what happened to Baltic Wolf was poor workmanship, and there's no enforcement power for that. What is changing under the new regulations that are coming in is that there's the opportunity with local authorities going forward for stop notices. So that is a way forward. It's been recognised that actually the enforcement powers we have are not good enough. And that is a big issue. It's been an issue for years. You know, I've been in building control for, as I say, for a very long time.
I mean, again, you're talking about you doing the enforcement, but does this not actually come back to the local authorities to do the enforcement?
Yes, it would be the local authority that has to take the action. We would have to advise, and we'd have to go through the process and everything, but ultimately it would come down to your legal department.
And the completion certificates that were again signed off on all the houses on Baltic Way. I mean, as you were aware that there was poor workmanship, and they had not remedied these, were you not in a position not to give the completion certificates?
I think, as I say, this is before my time.
Yes, I know.
Been
I
here
realise
18
that,
months,
yeah.
And looking at it, I think there's a fundamental issue is with building control. We're only expected to look at certain stages of the work. So it would be foundations, it would be drainage, it would be damp-proof course level. We don't look at first fix, second fix. So there is a fundamental failure within the building control process, which has now been recognised, of responsibility related to the contractor. And they are major issues we have. And this is a major issue with having competition, I believe, because you don't have the control that local authority would necessarily have. I'm not saying that local authorities do make mistakes and don't see things, and that has been accepted. But generally speaking, we can only enforce, as I say, with fundamental failure of a regulation. That's where we would be. Workmanship is the biggest single issue in construction in Britain today. Whether it's cladding, whether it's the right insulation, all of those things have led us to where we are now, and that's part of the issue following on from the Grenfell inquiry, and that's why we're going through massive changes as a profession. But yes, I mean, I'm happy to speak again and sort of run through the issues and where we can actually stand with that. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Dunn. Councillor Smurden.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm sort of assuming, I mean, that within building control, you've got three, because you said you've got competitors, etc. So presumably, a large-scale developer would provide their own, I'm assuming, and then you've got people within the commercial sphere who provide building control, as a standalone thing, and then you've got yourselves as the local authority. So what? I mean, I don't want a exact figure, but as a ballpark figure, what sort of percentage of applications do you think that in inverted commas, our building control deals with out of out of all of them?
I can tell you exactly.
Yeah.
We average around about 87% of market share. In the last quarter, it was 91%, and that is at least 18% higher than most local authorities.
How many percent higher?
Sorry, 18% higher than most local authorities would expect. Yeah.
If I could just come back. Personally, first of all, I'm surprised, but B, I'm gladdened, to hear that the percentage is that high. I mean, the perception that I'd got was that the amount of which building control that local authorities did was a lot lower than that, and the bulk of it was, or a larger percentage was done by commercial, and to a degree that possibly followed on from why there are concerns within the industry about quality, etc. But I'm glad to hear what you have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other questions? Councillor Birch.
Yeah, I think it would be helpful if Nigel to just give us a lowdown on the new building safety regulations regime, because I mean that is going to be an important feature, and I think be useful for members to have your view on that and the way forward.
Yes, following on from the Grenfell disaster, Dame Judith Hackett did an inquiry. A lot of findings came out of that, fundamentally to do with regulation, the regulatory process. So a lot of work's been done. We've got new legislation coming in. There's new requirements being laid upon local authorities and building control in particular. The new safety regulator will be under the Health and Safety Executive. They will be in charge of all of the building regulations and everything relating to it. So as of October next year, all operational staff will need to be licensed. So we are becoming one of the very few professions within the UK that will need to be licensed. So there's a license process going on. There are a number of levels. Level 4 is small domestic works. Level 5 is domestic and small industrial commercial, and level 6 means that you can deal with every type of work, and that includes what we call high risk, high rise buildings, because there's extra legislation coming in for those. Currently, all my staff are on the train to be level 6. We need to have level 6 as a partnership, because within the 3 councils we have one high-rise building, which is in Teignmouth. It's high-rise by about 1 metre. So we have asked them if they can raise the gardens around it, and so we can sort of take it out, but we can't, I'm afraid. But moving forward, there's going to be a lot more high-risk buildings that will come into that category. So you're talking about hospitals, nursing homes, and those sort of things. So we have, I'm glad to say, all of our surveyors are on the train to get qualified for that level. We are providing with extra training as well. We're doing that ourselves. But the responsibilities coming forward are massive. The legislation, the regulations we're expected to enforce are going to be more focused. I think that's the best way to say it. But also our responsibility is going to increase. So the responsibility with regard to making decisions, with regard to how, if something goes wrong, that may be reported back and sort of sanctions. One of the things that should be mindful of the councils is that if a local authority does not have a building control service that is suitably has suitably qualified staff or competent staff, or running as a sort of staff numbers, for want of a better word, there is potential for that service to go into special measures. And so that would be not only the fact that you would lose your building control service as such, but it would also mean that if you had a service come in, you would have to pay for that totally. So you would not just be paying for the non-fee earning, you would have to be paying for the fee earning, and see where the sort of the income separation is there. There is also ultimately, if something does go wrong under the new regulator, and there could be fatalities for whatever reason, it is not the building control staff, the building control manager, or even the director that would be held responsible. It will be the chief executive of the council. So ultimately, those sanctions are now brought in, and they could lead to custodial offences now, sentences. So there's a big change, massive changes going on. I think we're ahead of the curve with regard to that. I've always been a person to think of, the future. With regard to sort of financial plans, we're always looking at a medium-term financial plan, 3 to 5 years ahead. Staffing as well. I mean, we are lucky insofar as local authority building control as a national organisation have recognised there's a shortage of staff, and it's not just with us as a partnership and neighbouring authorities, it's nationally, and they've been given funding from government to bring in a number of trainees, which are fully funded, not only salaries but training costs, etc., to place in certain areas. And I'm happy to say, as of yesterday, we actually managed to get the only trainee within the Southwest. So, we're looking forward. We try to do succession planning. I've got 2 other members of the staff already at a lower level who are actually going through the degree courses. So I think we're in a very good place going forward. Most of the building control profession is over 55 at this time.
Thank you very much. I'll come to you, Councillor Foss. Councillor Pearce.
Thank you, Chairman. I was going to ask Mr Hunt if he could quickly go through the climate change measures which will apply from June next year, because this is running in tandem with our climate emergency planning statement that members had training on yesterday morning. It would be interesting to know. You're very lucky because you're able to impose them and impose them good and early. So we're really looking forward to that. If we could just know a little bit more about what they are. Thank you.
Yeah, I think broadly speaking, I think the most important things rather go through the what the requirements are. I think it's the way we interact with you. I think that's the most important thing. I think what we've got to look forward to is how we do that. So I think we've got to have early intervention with yourselves with regard to how you as authority want to go forward with it, because each authority will have different views. I think that's the thing. And whilst looking forward to it under the building regulations, there are lots of sort of overlaps with regard to regulations. And that's where we've got to sort of drill down and sort of make sure that everything that is expected we can do. I mean, I'm quite happy to come along and do a presentation on the whole part of the regulations, if that would be useful.
I think that would be extremely useful, because I think on the planning side, we're anxious that we should be, if you like, ahead of your game, so that people aren't putting in plans that they then find subsequently can't be built out because of building regs. So we need to work together on this. You're absolutely right. And so the further ahead, particularly the planning officers can get on it, but members can be informed as well, the better it would be. Thank you very much.
Just in support of that, regulations changed back in June with regard to shadowing, overheating, etc. of houses, and the process prior to then is that an application could be submitted and we could have blanket calculations, thermal calculations for every plot, and that's what we needed to check. Now every single plot needs to have a calculation done. We need to check that. We need to check the orientation of every single property. So in June, we had a massive influx of applications. So one of the things we've got to be mindful of is that because they did that, they've actually got 3 years to start that job under those old regulations. So that's another thing we'd need to look at, is sort of, was that application submitted before that time? So how do you then, if they hadn't got planning permission, how do you then apply that? Yeah. So I think that's another discussion I need to have that with all 3 councils. How we go forward with regard to that.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Foss, Mr Hunt, I'm sure you know already that Councillor Foss is Chairman of Development Management here. Over to you, Councillor Foss.
Yeah, well, thank you, Chairman. Actual fact, Councillor Pearce touched on most of what I said, but I am going to say thank you for what you're saying this afternoon. It's very, very interesting. I'm only a substitute here today, but I'm pleased I'm here.
Ms Pan.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a couple of comments, if I may. I mean, first of all, I think hopefully members have heard how sort of proactive the Building Control Partnership is. Not only are they sustaining and looking at succession, but they're looking, to grow the opportunities that the partnership bring. It is a really, really good service, very well respected by the building industry. And I think the opportunities, as Councillor Pearce has set out and Councillor Foss about planning, are really important. At the moment, the awards that Nigel touched on are delivered for sort of building control, delivery of good projects, and they're really well attended. Loads of people, and what we're looking to do is to expand those to think, okay, we've got Dev 32 plus coming in. How do we actually raise the profile of jobs and buildings that are being constructed in line with our guidance, which we're looking to put in place? So that's another step we're taking forward. And the other thing is around corporate join up. In the past, the partnership was a little bit distant from the council, but we're working really hard to bring it back in, so that the relationship between building control, environmental health, planning enforcement, we've got all of those sort of sometimes crossed over skills and legal responsibilities, and we have a discussion about projects. We've had some quite big incidents in the past where we've had a great response because we're joined up. So I think there's more we can get out of the partnership, and I think that's something Nigel agrees with, and Teambridge is supportive of, and West Evans. So I think it's great opportunities going forward. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Bell. Councillor Foss.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to come back on, I mean, anything that we have in the future, I would suggest, there's some D&M members here today, but that all members have the opportunity to attend when Nigel's speaking, because all members at some stage or other have to make decisions on their own wards. And I think that, we've done quite a lot of training recently, and we know there's a lot of new stuff coming through, to say the very least. And I think all members need to be kept up to speed on it. Okay, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Hunt, thank you very much for your time today. It is clear from the answers to the questions that we are, through you, in this part of the establishment is in safe hands. So thank you, and if you pass our thanks to your staff as well. Okay, grand. Thank you very much. Okay, we just have a short break, members, while we go from this report to the next one. Right, we got Mr. Parkinson.
Yeah, they're outside.
Are they?
They were outside.
Thank you, Mr. Brooke. Yeah, brilliant. Okay. Members, item 8 is the report to overview and scrutiny of the leisure contract fusion quarterly update report. So I know Mr. Parkinson's coming in now. Lovely. Councillor Hawkins, over to you.
Right. Good afternoon, Chairman and members. Hopefully everybody will have read the report that has been provided to you. I'd just like to give an introduction to it. We have obviously a number of challenges still from the pandemic and from the cost of living crisis, which is developing over the next few months, hopefully not years, but hopefully a few months. In my view, our partnership with Fusion and with Tadpole provide the South Hams with 4 excellent leisure centres in our 4 area centres. We are lucky to have 4 leisure centres which are open, with swimming pools, gyms and other facilities. There are challenges, as I say. I would like to welcome Peter King. You've already met Peter King many times in the past. I think we've got Claire Bill virtually. We've got John Parkinson and we've got Chris Brooke. Nationally, the leisure sector continues to experience difficult times. Following the slow recovery from COVID-19 and the pandemic in the operations of our leisure centres, we are all facing the same challenges from current global and UK economic instability, energy and living costs and cost of living crisis, plus increased operational costs, along with ongoing staffing, recruitment and retention issues. The recovery of our leisure centres is ongoing, and the usage figures when compared to the national leisure benchmarking data from Sport England, our centres are doing well. Our centres, in particular, our swimming pools, had the highest usage of the usage in August, helped obviously by our tourists and visitors and family activities which are on offer. Totnes is taking longer to recover its usage, reflecting its older age and condition following similar national trends. And I remember when I was at primary school, I went to Tadpole when there wasn't any dry side leisure centre there, and I learnt to swim in Totnes. The swim school usage has been very good and has been helped by an increase in the parent and child swimming programme. Also, on a positive note, a new sports and community development officer has now been appointed and started work this week. This is a really good and important position, one which you as a committee have requested, and I personally as the executive member have requested, so that we can develop outreach work in our communities. We continue to work with Fusion on the decarbonisation of our centres through the solar project. The project has been delayed, unfortunately, by having to rearrange new tenders with contractors. All sites have been completed and arrangements to undertake the works are being finalised at this time. Further update to be provided. Also, the investment on Totnes has not at this stage been able to take place, or at least given the green light to. But I would like to assure members that this council and I as the executive member will do all we possibly can, working with our Totnes members and working with Tadpole, which is their leisure centre, to ensure that development and modernisation of that centre will take place. And we had a meeting with Tadpole yesterday. Finally, on my introduction, I would like to just publicly thank Peter King for all the hard work and effort, the dedication. We've worked well together in the last 4 years. I have always had a fast and speedy response from Peter, and I think that has been seen through all the centres over the last 4 years, and I really am, you will be missed. Sadly, Peter is leaving us. I think he's got two more weeks to go.
Yeah.
He'll be a very hard act to follow. And I'll pass now on to Peter, if that's okay with you, Chair.
Yeah. Can I just test you can all hear me okay? Is that working? Am I okay to sit, or do you want me to stand?
Mr. King, you are more welcome to sit.
Thank you very much. Thank you for those kind words. It's been an absolute honour and pleasure to work amongst all the centres, and especially through some of the rocky times we've had with COVID and reopening and closing and getting us back to an even keel. I'll talk a little bit about the challenges to come, but we're definitely on the way up, as you can see in the report. If I may, I'll just run through a couple of the highlights of the report, and then really open up for more of a question and answer, anything people would like to discuss, really. So is it possible to bring that up on the screen? There we go. So I'll just touch very briefly on some of the marketing, a little bit on sport and community. We have my colleague Claire Bill on the line. I may defer to her if I get anything particularly wrong. A little bit on membership. I'm sure there's some notes on the bounce back from there. I'll talk a little bit about the customer satisfaction and some of the comments we're getting through, and then moving forwards. So if we could just touch on the marketing side. So just 2 points from here. In order to encourage usage of the centres, we also recognise that people are very much sort of, what I was going to say, cash strapped at this time of year as well. So we put in an offer that was to have December and January for free. We launched that in August, going into September. It's done really well. So you'll see a lot of campaigns that we've run have been very much about value for money, reduction on items, free usage. We're currently offering a free 3-day pass. So lots of free and reductions in order to drive footfall. Same as we did a free 1 month for anybody that referred a friend to use the centre as well. If I could just jump on to the next one. Part of the local marketing items that we've been doing through the centres is really work closely with our local community groups. So we've been targeting things like our local supermarkets. We've been working with our local rugby and football outlets. We introduced a young adult membership back in June. lots of local work, which we're trying to use our network from there. So you'll see more and more of that coming through as we continue to progress through this year. I'll jump the next one. This is just really just some of the images that we've shown. So we've hosted Slimming World within the centre at Ivy Bridge. We've got new spin classes at Quayside. The one in the bottom is a new ballet and toddler class that's operating. And again, a big part of this is that we've been trying to do more for parent and child groups, and especially where we offer free swimming for under the age of 2 years old. So if I could come on to a couple of the highlights on the sports and community. Just some items that we've been working on, and might defer to Claire. Working closely to get our youth nights back up and running, looking at a new youth provider in terms of trade. We're also offering at Ivy Bridge our own youth night, so this is without any youth services. So we've been putting more and more on for children to come and use the centre on a Friday. The roller discos really kicked off through Dartmouth and through the work that Jonathan have done there with the youth nights. That's now extrapolated out to the likes of Ivy Bridge. We're looking at West Devon and so forth. So that's proving extremely popular. Operating free sessions, part of TQ6 for Dartmouth. We ran over the summer holiday period. Didn't quite get the attendances we were hoping for, but have now extended that up until about the 5th of November. And then bringing things back like our SEND and swimming programs. So lots happening in the community development world. What I won't do is I'll jump forward if I may. And one more if I may. We talked about the community outreach. This is an area that we identified some time ago. I know that everyone here was passionate about. We have a dedicated resource now in order to help us deliver out in the local community. You'll see some of the postcodes that have been earmarked, and that was done from the hot postcode map mapping work that we overlaid where we were pulling from or where we weren't. That's grand. So if we could jump on a few. And again, please. Okay, participation numbers. It's difficult to see that number there right on the top, and it's difficult for me to see actually. I think we're at 60. Can't remember my number now. 64. Yeah, so 64,000. We're currently now just sitting at around the sort of the 62, 63,000. So actually the participation, this is as a total contract, is now bouncing back. We're getting back towards the 2019 numbers in terms of footfall, and has grown, as Jonathan said, over the summer period. We had a really good period with a lot of visitors. We introduced a short-term membership. We saw more people returning and using the centres, which was great. So if we could just break down, again, it's easy to see in the report, but these participation numbers, as you can see, Dartmouth is the bottom one in blue, and then comes up from there. One of the things you will see is we've had a bit of a drive at Totnes. We have seen participation numbers take a bit of a jump just after May, and we've had a high usage from a local school, so a special school that have been using us, which has also helped to drive those numbers. The next big thing for us really is obviously our membership. Membership again is just shy now of the 2019 COVID numbers. What I will say within this, over the summer period, I introduced a 1 month, 2 month, and a 3 month membership. We also had 1 week memberships as well. And this was largely two things. Really was to target that sort of tourist sector. But it was also open to residents. So residents didn't want to commit. They could purchase on a short-term membership. It has driven some of the numbers, but what it does do is it drives the yield and our length of stay down. So I have to be a little bit careful because it looks fantastic on the screen, but behind it does drive a little bit of the yield and the length of stay. And last two, really, before I take any questions. This is our NPS, so our customer satisfaction benchmark. Mainly, we get some great comments. Staffing is always high. Facilities is always good. And pool and group exercise always get some really, really good feedback. Pool, largely, people love the swim teacher. and the pools are in fantastic condition. The other is group exercise, again, very much people-led, tends to get some really good feedback. Changing rooms, and cleanliness, these two are very much go hand in hand. Cleanliness is always an area that is a challenge. We've changed our cleaning schemes. There has been improvements across all sites, but as the footfall went up during the summer, the customer satisfaction score dropped a bit. It has bounced back up. And then the last bit, really, just to give you a footnote on some of the items to come. We touched on solar, Jonathan touched on. We've had a little bit of a bump in the road. We are pushing forward with that to get them on all the sites. I talked about earlier about programming. More and more you'll see about targeted programming. Parent and child sessions has been something I've been passionate about. I'd like us to see more for the over 65s coming as well. So some sort of targeted programs to attract different users. We talked about the outreach. We touched very briefly on having to look at a different model for the development of Totnes. One of the ones we haven't engaged with and started yet, we do an annual price review and a pricing strategy. That is to come. And at the moment, one of the other bit of the heart of the centre is the cafe. We had expressions of interest that didn't then turn into actual tenders. So we've got to go back to the drawing board with that. And we're doing what we can to offer teas and coffees within each site. So that gives a bit of a flavour of the report.
Mr. King, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm sure you won't be short of questions. I'll go straight to Councillor Taylor.
Yes, thank you very much. Well, first of all, I can applaud your optimism.
Yes.
Because I've got, I would have concerns about the pressures on finances for every single person, and I would say that I presume you haven't got an estimate on shortfall of finance and footfall, because you're not expecting that from your presentation, but I would be concerned now with the pressure, financial pressure on everybody that actually uses these facilities, and that would be a worry for me. But I do applaud your presentation and your optimism, because I'm afraid it's a little bit above mine.
So we anticipate staying flat at the beginning. We anticipate from now no growth. So it will be sort of, we can maintain our membership level between now and the end of the year. We will have to take a review of how we get on in January, February, March. It's always called our golden quarter. We will be offering different options on memberships, and we normally do 0 startup fees, all those sort of things to encourage people. But it is a bit of a, I'm afraid, like I say, it is a bit of a finger in the air, but I think we should do favourably.
Yeah, I understand where you're coming from, but if we were giving a free, are they not going to just take the free bits you offer and then disappear, because you're not going to gain too much financially from that?
So it depends on the mechanics. So normally it's free with a small tie-in period. So there are ways of mitigating those risks as well.
Thank you. Councillor Birch.
Yeah, if I could refer to the item on page 18 of Mr. Parkinson's report at 3.4, which deals with membership levels, and and Mr. King touched on membership levels in his presentation. But if you look at the figures for Totnes, you'll see that Totnes membership has plummeted down by 30% since the pre-pandemic. And that's a considerable drop. It's the rest are, I mean, for example, Dartmouth is nearly 100%, and the other centres are reasonable, other than the Parklands at Oakhampton, which is outside of this authority. So my question to Mr. King is the lack of investment in Totnes one of the contributory factors to the fall off in membership at Totnes?
I think the short answer is yes. It is not as developed or as attractive as the other sites. The other sites have all had investment, and when you go between the two sites, there's a noticeable difference between swapping between an Ivy Bridge and a Totnes. So I think the answer to you is yes, it does have a detrimental effect on the bounce back. What we are seeing is a slightly different usage at Totnes. People are still coming, but they're paying and playing, i.e. paying as they go, but not necessarily returning to the membership. And that's one of the conundrums at the moment, why we're getting footfall, but actually the membership is lagging behind some of the others.
In that case, could I move on then to 4.2 of Mr. Parkinson's report, which goes to report that Fusion has recently taken the decision not to proceed with the proposed investment at Totnes. There's a long and sorry saga as to the delay in proceeding with the investment at Totnes. It started life over 2 years ago with a proposed project of 1.5, now reaching 1.9. My question to Mr. King is, what is going to happen as far as Fusion is concerned in bringing about a much needed investment at Totnes?
Yeah, certainly. So there has been a lot of discussions regarding this, and there's people in this room we have discussed with as well. What we've said at the moment is the current model of the way that we're borrowing is not economic in this current climate. There is too much risk around the payback and the benefit of doing it in this particular model. What we've agreed to is go back and look at different options and come back with a revised business case in the next 6 to 9 months, looking at lots of options where we might pull in small pots of funding from one area. Tadpole might be able to draw down on some funding to support that. What funding do we leverage that's ring-fenced from the council? So we're having to look at this conundrum and go at it a different way.
Okay, did you want to come in, Councillor Hawkins, in response to Councillor Birch's question? Yeah.
Thank you, Chairman. As Councillor Birch knows, as does the Totnes members know, we had the meeting yesterday. A further meeting is going to take place within the next month, and we are committed to do all we possibly can to improve the Totnes site as fast as we possibly can. Members have seen the business case that Fusion provided just in September, I think it was. Unfortunately, due to circumstances outside of the control of this council, we are where we are at the present moment, but we are going to do all we possibly can. The meeting which took place yesterday was with Totnes members, because I want Totnes members to be fully involved with how we come forward with a plan.
Thank you very much. I'm going to come to you, Councillor Jackson. I've got Councillor Foss next, then I'm coming to you. Councillor Foss.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. This is more by way of a thank you rather than anything else. My Rotary Club in Kingsbridge for many years has run the swim marathon, which COVID completely and utterly messed up. We did have a little bit of, as Mr. Parkinson will remember, had 1 or 2 emails on the subject. Yeah. But I will say that we did have a very successful one in the beginning of October. A few schools weren't there. But I want to thank the staff because that afternoon went exceptionally well. Thank you.
Thank you. I've heard some really good things about it, and I apologise for the slight bump in the road in the initial phases. But good, glad to hear that.
Thank you. Councillor Jackson.
Yeah, hi. A few things actually. Can you just someone clarify about the change in contractor to installing the panels? And so it said that someone's going to go and have a visit on the 15th of October.
So,
and how long will it be from the visit to implementation?
Yeah, certainly. So I'll explain a couple of blocks at the moment. We had a chosen provider, and unfortunately, just prior to looking at one of the sites at Oakhampton, there was a bit of a change in what they could do. So they said we can't do Oakhampton, and on top of that, it changed some of the business case on that as well. I was unhappy with that. I didn't think that was acceptable just when we were about to press the go button. So we decided to park that and to go back to the market and get further quotes. We've had contractors now out through all sites who have put forward paper-based bids. We're just reviewing that, so we hope to select. The only other part is there's a piece outstanding from a Fusion point of view, that needs to have a conversation with South Hams around the drawdown of the finances. We're hoping to be in a position to clean that up ASAP, and then we're in a go phase to start moving forward.
And a sort of time scale.
Well, it's difficult.
To report back to, you know.
It's really difficult to put an exact timescale on it because I don't know. But on the original timescale, I was hoping to be putting them up now. But I think we've gone back probably by 6 months. The other item to say in this, we haven't started the procurement of the panels yet, so I don't know how long that's going to take. But if we can iron out the financial side and just make that initial agreement, the project work then is move forward.
Okay, that's a bit disappointing, really, isn't it? But
I can understand that, but it's a lot of money, and to move forward with a case that I wasn't happy with, I think would have been a worse decision.
It's only anecdotally, I know that people have been saying. I know Councillor Taylor talked about people sort of not cutting down on it, but I know people are thinking about using it like a warm room type of place. You know, people going there for showers and because it's cheaper than turning your heating on at home.
We're all for that.
Yeah.
So if we can provide warm spaces, or
I know it's a really valued asset in Kingsbridge, and I just wondered, do you work with social prescribers at all? I wonder whether you could get some funding from.
We do. I know we do, but I'm gonna defer to Claire. I don't know if you can hear me, Claire. Please say yes. She has gone for a cup of tea, hasn't she? Hello. Hello, can you hear us?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can do. Can you hear us?
Sorry, I'm having real problems here. I can hardly hear you.
Okay, don't worry,
I think
Claire.
I caught a question on social prescribing.
That's correct. I don't know if you can hear. I was asked whether we do social prescribing. I'm sorry, the second part was?
I just wondered because I know that there could be some funding to be got from social prescribing.
Sure. And how we draw down any funding. If you can't hear us, we'll take this one offline.
No, I think that's okay. So yes, so I certainly link in with the social prescribing surgeries and with the PCN, the primary care networks, and are looking to see whether we can access funding or support through the exercise referral scheme. I'm also exploring options with community transport and patient transport, as I believe some of the surgeries offer their patient transport for social prescribed activities. So if the social prescriber, for instance, prescribes a patient to come to the leisure centre to do an activity, we may be able to help with transport through patient services. So we're looking at those options as well.
Okay, thanks.
So yes, it's anything to do with health or getting people in, we're very much trying to support.
And one last thing, I remember when you did the presentation last time, you said you were having issues with staff, having enough staff and lifeguards and things. Is that still the case? Or?
It is still the case. We've actually moved that forward, and strategically we've moved that forward. I've run 3 lifeguarding courses, so we've paid for people's qualifications, irrespective of how many hours they stay with us. So that's helped. We've been running more and more swim instructor courses out of Ivybridge. That's helped to swell our swim school. It's always a struggle. There just aren't enough people to go round, and then retention of the staff is another big thing. But I'm currently working on pathways, MVQs, ways that we can continue to educate people, which helps make it more sticky to stay. We're a bit better than we were in the summer, but I see that challenge going into next year as well. But better than we were.
Thanks.
Okay, Councillor Spencer.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to go back to 3.4, and I thought for a moment that Councillor Birch was going to steal my question, but he didn't. It talks in 3.4 of pre-COVID levels, and it talks at other parts of the report of pre-COVID levels. And I just wondered whether the time has come for us all to stop thinking about pre-COVID levels as being any form of benchmark. We are in a new world. The post-COVID world is currently very different still to the pre-COVID world. And, with global issues on top of that, maybe the post-COVID world needs a revised benchmark. And I just wondered what you thought about that and whether there was anything there that you could take back. And this also ties in with an expectation which is mentioned in 2.2 of the report, which says that income levels are not growing as expected, and then perhaps they are growing as expected, but with a post-COVID definition. I don't know if that makes any sense, but that's my first question.
Certainly, if I could try and answer, and I might see if John would like to. I suppose using COVID as a benchmark, because that's where the business was at. So I don't totally I totally agree with you. Is what I not disagree with you. The world has completely changed. The way that our customers' habitual habits have changed, the way they're using facilities, work has changed. So we are having to change along with that. So where we were and how people use the leisure centre in 2019 is very different now. Hence why I'm trying to work hard on the programming to make the centres attractive. The pre-COVID just gives us a benchmark of where we're trying to get back to. But what I would say is actually in 2019, the centres still weren't performing to our level of expectation and where we wanted it to be to give the financial stability behind the scenes. So to answer you, yes, I agree with you. It's probably a number that needs to go.
I would only add, yes, those figures again are used from a national benchmarking from Sport England and the Moving Communities platform, which was essentially the platform that was helped set up on the National Leisure Recovery Fund. So again, those sort of figures are being talked of in that national benchmarking. But as you say, we've moved on, and I guess it's interesting. There is no up-to-date benchmarking since January 2022, start of this year, regarding Sport England data. I'm actually at a meeting next week with other colleagues from Devon and our county sports partnership, talking about how we use this data. So the terminology and the referencing and what we benchmark to is something we can definitely have that conversation about. Yeah.
Thank you. Another question, and I have one more beyond this. On 4.2 of the same report, the talk is of the Totnes Leisure Centre and delayed investment. John, you also mentioned the Moving On document, the Moving Communities document. In the Moving Communities document that you've mentioned, it says that recovery in participation has been faster in more modern facilities, with facilities refurbished in the last 10 years showing a throughput recovery of 68% compared to 62%, where for those properties that don't fall into that category, facilities, sorry. And it also talks about lower participation rates alongside increases in price of utilities and ageing facility stock will cause significant challenges for long-term sustainability of the sector. So that's obviously not just Fusion Leisure, but that does call into question perhaps this delayed investment in Totnes. And I'm not 100% sure, I'll be honest, about what the investment was going to be, but just using that single factor, that would suggest that we need investment. Any thoughts?
I would say yes, absolutely as that, but we're in different times in that respect. And in fact, at the start, even last year, the LGA, UK Active, all the national bodies were saying we need to face the national backlog of ageing leisure stock, of ageing leisure facilities across the whole nation. And they were calling for a £1 billion investment from the government to help uplift ageing facilities. Well, we haven't seen that, and I don't think we're ever going to see that investment. There'll be sort of targeted investment through Sport England strategic facility funds. But so that's a national sort of issue that is facing all our ageing leisure centres across the country. And obviously, there is now things being put on hold, as we've seen for Totnes. That's happening elsewhere. And as we know from the news this morning from BBC, there is a real issue of just keeping centres, keeping the doors open, getting the lights on. And I think that is very much, in for South Hams and West Devon to keep all our centres open. And we do have to consider what we can do in the short term regarding how to create a better environment in Totnes for the leisure centre there. So, yeah, I agree with that statement, but it's like the economics and the investment and the business case for that being viable.
Right. just an observation on page 31, our page 31. It talks there about analysis of South Hams Ward's participation, and Bickley and Cornwood is mentioned. Have an interest from the ward councillor. I have to say that we had a scheduled meeting with Active Devon and Claire for next week, which unfortunately I've had to call off or postpone because I've been asked to take part in another committee. But I'm hoping that sort of thing will pull something out. And perhaps you mentioned, Mr. King, about Karen Dent, I think it is, your new outreach worker.
Yes.
This is maybe where she might fit in, because if the responses from the survey that we did in Bickley and Cornwood, where unfortunately we've only pulled, I understand from this, 51 responses, that's probably double what we had a couple of months ago. But I'm hoping that that's what her job might be, to interpret and take forward the decisions that have come out of the survey. So that was just the other part of that question. Is you mentioned that the cafe is proving to be a problem. My understanding was that cafes are a real goldmine for leisure centres. Well, my limited experience of one leisure centre is that they are, you know, teas, coffees, food, you know, whatever, can pull in useful levels of income, particularly with the markups involved in, you know, a cup of coffee costing you threepence maybe, or 3p, and selling it for £2.50.
Sure. So if I could try and answer both those questions. So yes, from the community outreach, that's exactly the role to, as you said, is to look at the data, where is there a need, and then where can we have resource into that need. So that is exactly what that person is there to do. Without that resource, it falls back to the leisure centres, and they've got lots of other things they've got to do. So the leisure centres will support the strategic outreach work. Karen will head that up in order to deliver some of those local community activities. Yes is the answer on that one. In terms of cafes, we've run the cafes across Southampton and have done for a number of years. One made money, one broke even, two lost money. And that was with higher membership and higher footfall. We're not in a position to put in any loss-making services at the moment, and it's very questionable whether they would even break even. We went to the market to see if we could get local suppliers to deliver. There seems to be a number of interested parties, but we haven't been able to move that forward into a more official bid or tender, which we'd asked to be done. And then that's left us with still a hole in the cafe side. We're currently looking at some other options. We are offering teas and coffees within the centres, but not to the level of you'd go and buy your Costa or your Starbucks up the road. So I'm loath to say yes, they're money making. They are a potential to make money. One of the contractors that we've talked to, one of the operators, has said, "Well, that's great. You did X in this year, but we've got to make sure you double that." So there's no mean feat. They're not a money pit. Sorry, they're not a cash cow. They help people linger in centres though, and that is what is missing.
Councillor Hawkins.
Can I just ask all members to contact this new officer that's in place with Fusion, because that's exactly what she's there for, to actually have contact with all of you as council members and community leaders, to actually try and develop that work that Barry has been so hard fought and Councillor Hopwood has in the past. But that is exactly what this officer is there for. And for those councillors that are in towns, you know, go to the leisure centres, work with the managers, work with the staff, because they are there to provide our communities with facilities and develop those facilities. And the most important thing is we get people through the door. I would say bums on seats, but it's not. Well, I suppose it could be on bums on bicycles. But it's really important we get people through the doors.
On that last point, Mr. King, in the report there is a lot of emphasis on membership. Can you just explain to the committee, this is the last chance I've got to ask you this, can you just explain to the committee what is the percentage of importance between memberships for Fusion as opposed to one-off walk-ins? Councillor Hawkins talks about, those august days in the last monarch's era when he was a puppy and he learned to swim, and those long time ago. They were municipal swimming pools in those days, and the whole point then was that people only paid for a one-off. That was the unique selling point. Now, I'm reading in this that the emphasis is far more on memberships.
So I suppose there's a few answers to your question. One is anybody that walks through our door is important to us as a customer. So I don't really mind if you want to come in and pay over the till and enjoy your swim, or whether you're on a direct debit. We also are inclusive. So there's no long-term commitment. You can pay monthly, you can pay as you go, you can be a visitor and book. So the centres are open to all. The membership, when we start to look at the commerciality of a centre, probably around 65 to almost as high as 70% of our income, our guaranteed income, comes through membership. So if you said, right, well, let's move all them onto a pay and play, well, I might have a cracking month one month, and then we will have a dire December. So it's guaranteed income, and the large chunk of our money comes through that. Now, the services, then, your sports or your gym, your classes, go to service that in order to give value for money for the membership. That's why it's so important to us.
Councillor Sweet.
Hi, hi Peter. Yeah, a couple of things. Picking up on cafes that Barry's talked about. I'm really passionate about having a cafe again in Totnes. I don't think Fusion ever ran the cafe there, did you? I think it was closed before.
No, not at Totnes. There was only ever a vending.
Do you have, or do you, John, do you have historical figures for the takings at that cafe? I mean, I know that it's something that people really want again.
For Totnes, I'd have to check. Not in my time. Coming up sort of 4 years now. We haven't operated.
Yeah, I just wonder if they are. If
there
they
may
exist
be. I'd
somewhere.
have to go back to either tender documents or look to John and see if he can help me with that. But
I know. Yeah, we're going back over 10 years ago, aren't we? In the previous contract, so there was an in-house provision, and then when the previous operator said no, it's not working, there was then a local business, I think, that did take on. It was upstairs in the studio room.
Yeah. No, I mean, because it was really popular because they did breakfast, they had a creche, and for mums to go and do workouts and eat. It was a licensed bar, wasn't it? They had all sorts of events and kids parties, and it was wide, and it would be hard to think that it wasn't profit making. So I'm not quite sure why it folded.
we think there is an opportunity for provision for cafe, and it is something that we've reviewed and built into our plan.
Yes.
Fact at the moment is we're not able to move forward on that plan, so we need to come back and have a look at that. But the answer is yes, we do also think there is an opportunity for some cafe provision at Totnes.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like it could be a cash generator for, pretty much straight away for the centre. I also just talking about, figures in general before COVID. Again, I'm not a fan of cashless. So I wonder, had the figures recovered completely post going cashless? Because there wasn't much of a gap, was there, between that and COVID? I mean, literally months. I'm just wondering if there is any correlation on that, or whether it's just impossible to tell.
It's almost impossible. There's so many factors that affect the usage patterns and then the way customers behave. It wasn't. At no point did we see a detrimental downturn at the time we went from accepting cash and going cashless. There was no significant change in the operation from participation, from income. There were some groups we had to work closely with to get over that, so we provided unique options.
Yeah.
But no, there's no evidence to say that.
Okay, I mean that's good. That's a good thing. Obviously, I just it just sort of came to mind really.
I think now this world's even moved further on from when we first did it. Try and pay for something with cash is almost impossible.
Yeah, I just think sometimes some people just stop doing certain things. But yeah, no, it just came up as a thought really. But thank you again. Can I pass on my thanks to you?
Sure.
And please tell your successor how important it is to kind of connect in with the plans for Totnes and to to really kind of engage and try and get those reports and that done in a really good amount of time.
Well done.
Personally, from me, and I'm sure that other Totnes members feel the same. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, there you are, Mr. King. You go with the words of the Totnes councillors ringing in your ears. But from the rest of the committee, you go with our thanks for the support you've given us and over your time, and we wish you well for the future.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank everyone here for their help and support and allowing me to come forward and talk to you all. So my thanks, and there's some great facilities out there. If we can get through these sort of tough times, I'm sure they will fly. So thank you.
Thanks, Peter.
Thank you very much. Councillor Birch.
Yeah, there's a recommendation on the paper. I would like to propose an addition to the recommendation to highlight the concerns that have been raised on the Totnes Centre. So if I could propose the following be added to the recommendation, and it reads as follows. The Overview and Scrutiny Committee notes the disappointing membership figures for Totnes and requests proposals for progressing the much needed improvements to the Totnes Leisure Centre be set out in the next Fusion quarterly report. Will I read that out again? Please. For the benefits of Doug? Yes, please. Yeah. The ONS committee notes the disappointing membership figures for Totnes and requests proposals for progressing the much needed improvements to the Totnes Leisure Centre be set out in the next Fusion quarterly report.
Can I just add? So from the meetings that we had and with our chief executive, we have committed to a 6 to 9 month backstop to have a renewed business case with those options. I'm trying to think when the next quarterly report is, because we've got the next will be the annual report. Yeah. But I just want to be careful that.
No, this is not for your benefit, Mr.
Okay.
King. This is for the benefit of the people of Totnes. The fact is that you're leaving and you've done a wonderful job. We don't know who your successor is, but what we want to make certain is that it's towards the top of the agenda. Now, we were in a meeting yesterday, and there's talk about, well, we'll see what happens in the next 6 months. Well, I'm afraid we can't wait that long. What we want you to do, together with Tadpole, is to come up with a plan as to how we're going to take these proposals forward. Totnes has been waiting for over 2 years to get these improvements underway, and we've been told, sorry, we can't go ahead. We've been waiting patiently for 2 years. I don't think it's unreasonable to ask you to give your organisation, not you, your organisation to give some indication as to the way forward in the next quarterly report to this council.
Okay, before we go to the recommendation then and talk about it, Mr. Brooke.
Thank you, Chairman. Whilst I support the sentiment, I just want to be careful that we recognise that specifically in Totnes, the contract for delivery of leisure is between Tadpole and Fusion, and therefore it's not our place to compel them to do anything in this context.
With respect, Mr. Brooke, that's the recommendation is requests the proposals. It doesn't say instructs.
Councillor Hawkin.
And I've constantly given reassurance that's exactly what we're going to do. So I don't see any real reason for that to be put in, but that's up to you.
But equally, you presumably have no objection then?
It's up to you, Chair.
But if you've constantly said that's going to happen...
We're going to do all we possibly can. We're going to do all we possibly can to bring that scheme forward as fast as we possibly can in the next 6 months to 9 months maximum. We're going to do all we can.
Okay, you've heard the conversation, members. Councillor Birch has proposed and Councillor Sweet has seconded the recommendation. Councillor Baldry?
Chairman, in the interest of being helpful, looking at your final agenda item, you're showing quarterly update refusion for the 8th of December, which seems very close to me.
Councillor Birch is just looking at what he's written.
It says 16th of March on your work programme.
Are we talking about the 16th of March? If we're talking about the 16th of March, Mr. White, perhaps it would make sense if we said the 16th of March rather than next but one.
I'd agree. I mean, that's within the timescales that we spoke about. You know, if we say next quarter, we're talking the annual review, and that's imminent.
Right, fine. Thank you, Mr. King. Okay, so there is a recommendation proposed and seconded, which doesn't have the disapprobation either of the lead member or Mr. King, because it sounds like the timescales work anyway. So on that basis, it's an addition because we haven't voted on it yet.
LC is, but
Sorry, Councillor, I get what you mean. You mean this is an amendment to the recommendation on the order paper? Yes, sorry. What I meant was this wasn't an amendment to... Yes. So there is an amendment to the recommendation as shown on the board, which is proposed by Councillor Birch and seconded by Councillor Sweet. So could I have a show of hands, please, to see who supports the amendment as shown on the board? That is unanimous.
That's unanimous. Thank you, Chair.
So that now becomes the substantive recommendation. So the recommendation is as is written on the screen. Exactly the same process. Then we have to now vote on the recommendation. So all those in favour?
That is unanimous. Thank you, Chair.
Right. Thank you, Mr. White. Thank you very much. Okay, here ends item 8. Thank you, Mr. King.
Thank you.
Okay, item 9 is 2021-22 performance management, and I think in the absence of Councillor Hopwood, Councillor Pearce, we are with you on this one. So, just give Councillor Pearce and Mr. Powell the chance to get comfortable, and then we will move on to item 9.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, you've got me today instead of Councillor Hopwood, who is elsewhere. Right, so this short report does two things. First of all, it wraps up the figures for the 21-22 financial year, somewhat in arrears, but it's doing it nevertheless, in the old format, which is what it is, and you've got all the figures there and some commentary, in Appendix A. And then in Appendix B, you have the proposed format for reporting figures in future. The exact PIs which will be reported are still under discussion, but I think for your benefit, we're trying to make them so that they effectively report the performance and the effectiveness of the council for you, because that is really what you ought to be interested in finding out about, with some commentary so that you can understand what lies behind those figures, and with direction of travel and where improvements needed, where we're doing all right and all that, so that you're well informed of every 6 months on the direction of travel of the council. The two recommendations at the top reflect the two things that this paper is trying to do, and I'll be happy to take any questions if you've got any.
Thank you, Councillor Pearce. Members, any questions either on the report or on the new format?
Yes.
Councillor Smith.
I'm interested to know, you know, I have to admit I'm struggling with how it's going to be portrayed going forward. I mean, there's two, you know, there's 2 pages there. You know, are we still going to get the graphs that we had before? I mean, to be honest, you know, the first one, you know, it's just going to be a, you know, a question of whether it's green, yellow, or red. I mean, it's not fantastic, really. Compared to what we've got, which might not be brilliant, but it is fairly, comprehensive. What's coming looks a bit short on detail. If I was,
can I fill you in on that? It will be similar to what you have been seeing coming to the executive, reporting on Better Lives for All. And I think in that format, you do get plenty of narrative. Now, what you've got here are any examples, so they're not terribly real. That I can agree with you on. But if you look at the third page of that, you will see that the target percentage or whatever is given. This period gives you the level that's been reached, which will be in green. I have asked for those figures to be larger. And then there's some debate as to the arrow. The red arrow going down in that particular example is not terribly helpful, because actually, even though performance had gone down from 91% to 82% in the period, it's still well above the target level, which is 60%. So there is work to be done, but I think you will find actually that there will be plenty of narrative in there. And if you go back to the previous page, you'll see that there's a kind of summary there of the measures for each section we're looking at, and that will give you the smiley face. That'll give you the bare bones, and then when you want to go into the detail, you'll scroll down to the pages below, and it will give you the detail for each item. So I hope it's going to be better than what you've got at the moment, actually, because what you've got at the moment is the graph, but it doesn't tell you much otherwise. And last month you were just going to get the graphs, and I said, no, that doesn't give you enough information. So now you've got a bit of narrative with it. But I think what you're going to get in the future will be an improvement. If I didn't think it was an improvement, you wouldn't have seen it today.
Thanks. And thank you.
Indeed, but I think in fairness, that's probably why we still need to look at it, don't we?
Mm.
It's still in gestation, put it that way. But I think by the time you get the finished article, you will appreciate that actually it's considerably better than the example only as stamped across it that you've got.
Right, and then following on I don't know about vexed question, but a pet question of mine is accessibility of this information for members. Where is this going to be displayed? And because as long as I've been on the council, this information is provided. But if I don't want to be, from my own point of view, if a resident asked me, how do you look all this stuff up? I would have, put my hands up and say, I don't know. Now, Daryl sat here as well, and he's grinning as well, because he knows that I've been asking for this pretty much for as long as I've been on this council, and we still haven't got it. So, the plea once again is if there's a root and branch reform of this, that it is made more accessible to members, and members know exactly at a touch of a button how they can access this information. Because if you're putting it all out there and we can't see it, if it only comes like at a yearly scrutiny committee or something like that, then it's not really doing the job, in my opinion.
I'm going to ask a question. Yeah, sorry, Mr. Powell. Yeah, go on.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm aware, Councillor Smurden, you've asked that question on a number of occasions. If I can just add a little bit to the first question. So just to clarify a little bit, in terms of what you're getting at the moment, you're just getting a graph, as Councillor Pearce described. That graph is on one part of what you'll get. So you'll get this whole explanation about data quality, what good looks like, and so on for each of those PIs. So it'll be a far more comprehensive report that you'll get, and you'll be able to understand exactly what's being measured. Because at the moment, the graph, I couldn't understand some of the graphs, if I'm honest, in terms of what data they're providing, where they're coming from, how they're calculated. So the most important thing for us is to make sure that we've got assurance around the data quality, because if we're publishing this information, it needs to be correct. There was a report to Audit Committee questioning some of the data, so we'll be addressing all of that through this process. In terms of real-time information, we're not there yet. The information comes from various different software systems, and we have to do certain calculations before we can present it. So the ability to better sort of go into and look at each of these areas and get real-time data is not a position we're in at the moment. Mr. Davis may better add a little bit in terms of what Pentana might be able to deliver us for the future, but it's an ambition rather than the reality at the moment. I'll be honest with you, Councillor Snowden.
Mr. Powell, it might interest you to know, Mr. Powell, the question I was going to ask you was, is it the case that the graphs will be provided in future with an explanation in the manner that they are now, which is exactly what you've just said? Caspis.
If I can just add to that, well, where you can find them will be in the 6 monthly overview and scrutiny reports on the council's web pages, which you can bring up at any time or send a link to your constituent if they want to look at it. Or alternatively, there will be the 3 monthly reports to the executive, and then you in turn have your chance to ask questions of executive members on the various parts of Better Lives for All. So I think all in all, we will have a fairly comprehensive control and information system for telling all members what we're up to at the council, which they can then point their constituents in that direction if they want to see it. I mean, I guess it's been things like bin performance and things like that you've been looking at in the past. But that will just be one element, and it'll probably be interesting for residents to see exactly what else goes on apart from having their bins picked up.
Mr. Molyneux.
Thank you. Just building on what Mr. Powell and Councillor Pearce have said, the aspiration would be that all members of the public who want to access our services have a view of how long it will take. So if you go to our website now and you click on any of the main service pages, it tells you on there how long the average time is to answer the phone for that service area, how long the average wait time is. And actually what we would want to do going forward is start saying, if you're ringing up, if you're looking on the website about processing benefits, that we say we are processing benefits in 10 days, because this is part of expectation setting for the members of the public, which then reduces demand for people because they know then what to expect. So we've got some figures there that set an expectation for the public in terms of how long it's going to take to answer the phone. We should be aiming to have the general sort of performance metrics for each service visible to the public so that they know when they report a missed bin that we are collecting 95% of missed bins in 24 hours or whatever. And that really is important for setting expectations with members of the public. So that's the aspiration. We've started that piece of work. And as well as the reporting mechanism in here, we want to be as transparent as possible, which in turn reduces demand on our services.
Yeah, Councillor Spurn.
Can I mean, I understand fully that, this is a work in progress and, the aim is to revamp it and, display it in a better form. Can I ask that once it's done, and if we're moving over to this, that we have a members, training type thing on it, so that members know, exactly what they're, how to break this down and how to access the information. I think that would be helpful.
Councillor Spencer.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a question just to get some clarity on page 45 under the heading of percentage of telephone calls answered. I'm not querying the numbers particularly, but if we look at 21-22, we seem to be saying that about 70% of calls are answered. Does that mean that 30% of calls aren't answered at all? Or do they drop out, or what happens to the other bits? That was one question. And the second one is on page 48 under the heading revenues. We talk about a very good collection rate of 98.34% for 21-22, and that being higher than the national average, which fine. But it says that the council tax collection rate of 98% has been set for 22-3. And I just wondered whether, if it's already 98.34, should the target or aim be a higher rate than 98% for 22.3?
Mr. Powell, certainly for the first part of that question.
Can I suggest, Chair, we bring Mr. Davis in on the telephone answering, because he's ready to answer that question for us. Thank you.
Certainly. So so with regards to calls answered, yes, 30% of calls aren't answered, which means that hopefully the customers are choosing to listen to the answer phone or the hold messages and seeking to choose to undertake processes online. So a lot of our hold or wait messages direct the customers to the website and other ways of dealing with their inquiry. So that's to be expected. Obviously, some of those will be choosing to call back at another time or contact us via Messenger or web chats and other options. With regards to the council tax collection, we used to have a target of trying to improve on the collection rate for the previous year. We felt that was a bit of a strange target. It was never moving feast. So rather than having a moving target, we've set it as a standard of 98%. And I would expect that with the cost of living crisis, that's slightly lower than last year, but a target that probably hopefully can be achieved as well.
Thanks, Mr. Davis. Mr. Molyneux.
Thank you. Just on the council tax one, members will may remember that back in, I think it was June or July, we presented a business case to get a head of revenues and benefits, and part of that business case was to increase collection rates and that would pay for the role. So we've actually got an increase in targets going for the years going forward in terms of improving collection rates. So we will be increasing the collection or the targets for the collection rates on the basis that we've got a dedicated person to drive the service and to basically help drive up the collection rate. So that would include 22.3. I'm not sure. I think it's from next year. I'm not sure. I don't know. Sorry, can't remember.
Councillor Birch.
My question, I've got two questions. On page 43, the top chart dealing with the percentage of household waste sent for reuse, recycling and composting. There's a large board in the entrance to Fullerton. I would probably describe it as an advertising board, which states that this council collects that 60% of the household waste is sent for reuse, recycling and composting. That's clearly wrong, because if you look at this chart here, it's nearly looks like 45% or thereabouts. So it is certainly 15% down. So my first question is the board going to be amended? And that's my first question. And secondly, when will it be restored to 60%?
Mr. Molyneux, I think you can answer that question.
I think we do need to amend the board, so leave that one with us, Councillor Birch. In terms of the challenge that we've got, we talked about it with Councillor Baldry and Councillor Pearce this morning. Obviously, we are suffering from much lower recycling rates because of the initial suspension of the garden waste service last year and the cessation of the current free service this year. So that has an impact. We're also, because of the problems we've had in the past, that's had an impact as well. It is well rehearsed with members, the plan to improve the service. We've taken the service back from the contractor. We have said that we need effectively 9 months to stabilise the service and then deliver improvements, and that will be an ongoing process. But I would be looking for the residents of South Hams to increase our recycling rates, and I'd like to be the best in Devon. There was nothing more galling than finding that East Devon have increased their rates massively while we've dropped. So it's the ambition of all the officer team to drive up the recycling rates as quickly as we possibly can.
Yeah, but you haven't answered my question. Is when do you think it'll be 60%?
I'm not going to answer that question. I don't know.
You can't answer.
Councillor Ray.
Well, thank you, Chairman. Probably not the right place maybe to ask this question, but it is to do with recycling. And I am constantly being asked by some of the residents of my village, when are we all going to be on the new system? Do we have any idea when we may be on the new system? Because that will up our recycling rates for sure.
Councillor Baldry.
Announced. I did put my hand up before, but Mr. Molyneux has answered the question in an officer style, which I would not have been tactful enough to say. And the answer,
which is why I asked him, Councillor Baldry.
And the answer to Councillor Rowe is, I share your frustration. We had the meeting this morning with SLT and the executive, and I expressed very loudly, the sooner we get onto the new service for all residents, and the thing about which I am very keen to do as soon as possible is separate food waste collection, and that will increase our rates. But the answer is the officers are working flat out now, just absorbing the new service. We will move on to the next phase, which will be to improve recycling and provide the Devon Line service to as many residents as possible whenever they are able to do so.
Mr. Mullins, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I'm going to counter Councillor Baldry and say that was an officer answer to a question. So the answer is we will be bringing a report to the executive in December, which will set out the plans for how we intend to get to full recycling service as quickly as possible. So that will be the 1st of December executive. There will be a report which will set out dates and the plan.
Thank you.
Councillor Foss.
Well, I admire your ambition, Mr. Molyneux. I've never been very fond of the system we've got because it is very labour intensive for the guys who are actually putting it in the wagons. And I won't go into the eat in my hat mode, but I'll be very surprised if you ever get the whole system up to the whole box system. If you can, I'll take my hat off. Well, we'll take my hat off to you, but some of the places that we've got, narrow lanes, difficult spots to get into. I can think of one particular farm, naming no names, where it's going to have to be brought 400 metres out the road and placed at the end of the road in very windy conditions. I don't think it will, but we'll see. But I'll be very surprised if you make that. I've never been very fond of the system, full stop, because I think the system of putting it into Plymouth is just as efficient, or near as efficient.
Thank you, Councillor Foss. I'm going to stop there, and I'm going to say we're not having a discussion on waste, because this is not a discussion on waste. But nonetheless, you've had the opportunity to say that, and you have been heard.
Well, we're offering services to our community, but we've got to offer services that we can actually deliver. And will we be, there are people that are looking for that, and I think we need to be honest about where we are.
Absolutely. And as you've heard, on the 1st of December, the executive will be getting the officer report on where we're going from there. Councillor Rose.
Don't we all love a discussion on waste? I have a very, very small comment to add before we move on from the discussion on waste, which is actually just a thank you to officers and a bit of a kind of congratulations, because throughout this whole delightful waste experience of the last few years, I've occasionally asked the workers on the trucks, how's things on the ground? How is it for you? And throughout the whole story with FCC, the response was always very, very kind of frustrated, almost aggressive towards their...
Councillor Rose, remember we're not allowed to say anything unpleasant about
But
FCC.
anyway, I'm simply passing along what was told to me. Anyway, recently, I just asked the truck drivers, how are things now? And they said, it's absolutely brilliant. We get better pay, we've got better pensions, and we love it. So I just want to say that and say thank you to all the officers involved.
That's a nice way to end that. Right, lovely. Okay, councillors, do we have any more questions on the substantive issue?
Councillor Sweet.
Councillor Sweet, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Sweet.
Yep, I can change the subject from waste. So I'm just kind of looking at the figures for homelessness and temporary accommodation. So I wanted to ask, probably Judy, is there any kind of update or report coming up for the work that we were doing on homelessness and New Age traveller and gypsy strategy, particularly finding bits of land to use as temporary sites and permanent sites? And I know that the officer that was dealing with it has changed, and I know that there were a couple of meetings recently with travellers kind of move things on. But I think I know that myself and Councillor Long brought a motion to full council in 2021, I think, and the council supported that work, but we haven't sort of seen anything since then.
I can give you some update. You're right, there have been further meetings. It hasn't fallen off the agenda. There will need to be an assessment for the revision of the JLP because I think it was done somewhat hastily last time. But Councillor Sweet, what I can assure you is that this is not a quick fix, and it will take some time. Now I know that's frustrating, but your 21 motion is not off the horizon, well, out of vision at all. We are very conscious of it, but it is something that takes a long time to find the right spot. You've then got to find the funding because delivering a gypsy site is quite as expensive as building an affordable housing site. I can tell you that from experience. It is a very expensive exercise. So I think it will happen, but it's not going to happen immediately. But it hasn't fallen off the agenda. I think Mr. Molyneux would like to say something.
Mr. Molyneux.
Thank you. Well, I haven't even spoke to you yet, Councillor Pearce, but I'd had a conversation with the officers involved, and we are planning to produce an update for Councillor Pearce and then decide how to take that forward going forward. So that's coming in the next, I think, a couple of weeks, Councillor Pearce. So work is still ongoing. The team are still working on it, and we were going to update the lead member, which is Councillor Pearce, as soon as we could, and then decide how we bring that forward to the wider membership.
Thanks. I mean, I'm just aware that there are more and more people sort of living in caravans and vans, than ever, and the cost of living crisis is only going to exacerbate that. And delivering a larger scale traveller gypsy site will be amazing, but I think we need smaller facilities, especially in this area, but I'd imagine in Ivybridge and in the other towns as well. And I realise it's a land issue, but nevertheless, people are living in our car parks, aren't they? So we're kind of providing it in some shape or form anyway.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Sweet. Any more questions on performance management? No. Okay. Right. Thank you very much. So, was there a recommend? There were two recommendations. So the recommendations, as on the screen, review the performance figures and note the proposed format for the enhanced performance report. Councillor Rowe? Happy to propose? Yeah. A seconder? Councillor Birch? All those in favour?
That's unanimous, the recommendations. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Okay. Agenda item 10, task and finish group updates. Electric vehicle charging. Councillor Spencer.
Thank you, Chair. Just a very brief update. We had our first meeting on the 6th of October, which was via Teams. We discussed a whole range of issues, and we had an initial opportunity to express opinions and preferences and so on. We talked about working with Devon alongside their plans, which at that time were due to emerge soon. And courtesy of yourself, of course, you've produced that, which has now been sent out to all the members today. We also said that we would look at the strategies of other councils, and Adam Williams has issued half a dozen documents giving the strategies of obscure places like Somerset and, I didn't say that, and others, and members have had a chance to look at that. Adam also suggested that someone from the Devon Climate Emergency Group might address the next meeting, and he has lined someone up. The next meeting is scheduled for the afternoon of Thursday, the 10th next week, after the budget workshop, which is held in the morning. That was initially, and this is supposed to be by Teams, but since a number of the members will already be here, it will be in the council chamber as well for those who are here and want to stay on. That's it, really.
Thank you very much, Councillor Spencer. I think that's. Does anyone have any questions? I think that's a fair report of where we are at the moment. No? Okay, excellent. Thank you very much for that. Agenda item 11, the last item of today, is the committee work programme to look at the latest version and also to consider the formal request from Councillor Birch that we looked at prior to audit last time. So I don't know how you want to play that, Mr. Molyneux.
I suggest if we just review the work programme, of which I've got one comment, and then ask Councillor Birch whether he still wants to bring his suggestion forward. My only suggestion, Chair, would be: do we really need a quarterly update from Fusion in another month from where we are now? And I would suggest not.
Perhaps their new guy might.
I don't even know whether they've recruited the new guy, Chris, Mr.
I don't think they will. I think it's unlikely there'll be a new person able to represent, but purely from a quarterly updating perspective, the data won't be available because the data just won't be there. So the right time to have a quarterly update is the one after.
Members, is there an appetite to hear from Fusion again before March? Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, this was a request I made last year when Councillor Birch was, I think, chairman of this committee, because I was keen to see the percentage of differences in the financial income. We haven't seen that at all. So it was me that actually suggested that we had a quarterly. But if it is now not possible to get somebody from Fusion in December, I think maybe that I would propose we move it on to the next quarter. But I wouldn't like to see the quarterly one dropped.
Okay, that's fair enough. I don't think we were proposing to drop the quarterly. We were just going to take the 8th of December one out and then resume again in March. We're broadly happy with that, members? Yeah. There we are, smiling. So that was the only amendment to the work programme as is on the agenda paper. Okay.
Sorry, Chair, I've got one as well. It was on the back of our informal discussions about the draft budget setting meeting. Yours and the Vice Chair's view was that actually like a standalone separate meeting on the draft budget. Subsequent to that, I had an email from Mrs. Buckle, and her preference is that the 19th of January session is the draft budget setting meeting, with then the 12th of January meeting reverting to a, in inverted commas, normal committee meeting.
Thank you, Mr. White. Members, you will recall the horror in previous years of having an ONS and budget all on the same day, and how that just did not work. In terms of the amount of time we were having, to spend a full ONS meeting in the morning and then a full budget meeting in the afternoon. So the proposal is that we do an ONS on the 12th of January and an ONS budget session on the 19th of January with Mrs. Buckle, so that we don't have effectively what could be a 10-hour day on one day. I trust that that's broadly sensible with members. Councillor Chan, you had a question.
Yeah, that was my question about when the date was going to be decided, whether it's the 12th or 19th, but it sounds like we're going to be needed for both.
There will be an ONS on the 12th, a standard ONS on the 12th, following the work programme on the agenda paper, and then the 19th will be the budget session with Mrs. Buckle. Yeah.
Will the 19th budget session, will that be in person or on Teams?
My inclination, Chair, is that actually it'd be the opportunity for members to make formal recommendations to the executive when it considers the final proposal on the budget, and then onwards to council, so it needs to be a formal meeting.
Yeah, because it is our opportunity, as you say, to make recommendations to the executive. Councillor Rowe.
Yeah, could I ask then, is it going to be an ONS and D&M combined meeting on the 19th or not?
No, it isn't, because that was a decision taken through the constitutional review. That was abolished.
So we're going to have more meetings?
More meetings?
Well, there'll be one for ONS and a separate one for DM, which will mean that our officers will be addressing more meetings?
You'll have to ask the executive that question, Councillor Rowe, because that was their decision.
It's my understanding, I mean, maybe I've got this wrong, but I thought it would be all backbenchers coming to that meeting.
That was abolished, Councillor Pearce.
It was abolished.
In the Constitution. All members are, of course, always welcome to come to ONS.
Well, of course they are, yes.
But Councillor Birch is putting his hand up to say that it was abolished, so I'll let him say it.
Can I say that was one of the proposals that were put forward, an amendment to abolish the joint meeting. It was in the Constitution, and I put it to the vote that it actually continues, and then you all voted against it, so that's why it's no longer in the Constitution.
Well, it will be all members coming to your meeting, and if you will allow them to speak and take their opinions into consideration, which is how it always used to be anyway.
Councillor Pearce, I hope I have a track record of always allowing all members to speak. Right, so yes, Councillor Ray, to answer your question, any member of DM or Audit or indeed any other committee who is not a member of ONS who wants to turn up on the 19th of January will be very welcome. And on the 12th of January will be a standard ONS as per the agenda on this paper. Well, and you are at the moment, Councillor Foss, in fairness. And you've done your fair share of speaking. Councillor Birch, let's move on to 11A. Your proposal at the last meeting.
I have a proposal, but what I'm not seeking to do is reopen the discussion that was held or the debate that was held at Audit. I was unable to attend that meeting, but I have seen the video recording of the meeting, and I must say I found it very helpful. I thought it was a very constructive debate, and I'd like to emphasise I would like to say that Councillor Austin made a valuable contribution in setting out one part of the process that I think unfortunately has escaped scrutiny as such, and that was in fact the point that he made at the meeting about how in the beginning there was a support for the scheme, and in fact if I've got in front of me the audit report that was considered at the audit committee meeting, and it sets out that the Chamber of Commerce initially supported the scheme, the Town Council supported the scheme, and that PL21, which I presume means the community, they supported the scheme. And then somewhere along the line, there was an about turn, and the report shows that, for example, the Chamber of Commerce were against the scheme, the Town Council were against the scheme, and the PL21, the community, were against the scheme. And Councillor Austin made that point. And he came forward with his view as to why that happened. But I think it goes beyond that. Because the report at 8.7, this is the audit report, and I'll read it out. It says the public consultation was robust, and the targeted written consultation had a response rate of over 40%, which is high. And this is the important bit. It says, outsourcing the process to a third party to draft and administer the process was an effective way of introducing independence into the process. The Council should consider this approach again in the future should the need arise. In other words, the process that was being used in the Ivy Bridge consultation is being suggested that we use it again. Now, with the results that we received at the about turn, I'm just wondering whether that is actually the right way forward. Now, members of the committee will recall that way back in 2020, that the ONS was requested to come up with a consultation and engagement strategy. And at the meeting on the 19th of November 2020, a recommendation went to the executive to adopt the consultation and engagement strategy. And there's a lot of work went into that. And I'm just wondering whether or not that strategy played any part in the Ivy Bridge consultation. And I have my doubts, but I think that this consultation, where it seems to have gone wrong somewhere along the line, in my view, I think it needs examination. And that's why my proposal is, and I'll read it out, is that it be resolved that the consultation and engagement strategy proposed by ONS at its meeting on the 19th of November 2020 be reviewed, and that during the review, the consultation exercise carried out for the Ivy Bridge regeneration scheme be examined as to its suitability for a future approach. In other words, what I'm suggesting is that and then it goes on. It should go on to say that that it be the subject of a task and finish group, and that report back to ONS at its meeting to be held on the 19th of January 2023. In other words, that we as a committee set up a task and finish group to not only review the workings of the consultation and engagement strategy, but in particular look at how the consultation was carried out in respect of the Ivy Bridge regeneration scheme, and see whether or not the process that was followed, and that seemed to have had a strange result, then is suitable for a future approach. And that task and finish group can then come forward with a recommendation to the ONS meeting on the 19th of January. I think this is an exercise worth carrying out by this council, because clearly if it is anticipating using the same consultation process that we used at Ivy Bridge, then that worries me, because clearly something went wrong somewhere along the line. So I'd like to put that forward as a proposal.
Have you got that written down, Councillor Birch? I'm just thinking about for Mr. White's benefit. Or have you
I'll have it go.
You've shorthanded that, Mr. White. Okay, well done.
So, I'll read that again.
I've got a draft. If you're happy, if I type it up and see if you're happy.
Yeah, go on, Councillor Taylor. While Mr. White's doing that, go on.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I just get a bit distressed with all this. I mean, I sat through all at audit. We went through all this at audit, and I can't understand where we're off to, really, to be honest. It's dragging up back work that was already done. I mean, and the plan and protocol to be adopted for future developments was passed at the audit committee, and I just get a bit distressed with all this. I mean, I sit here and sit through audit, and then I sit through all this, and what Councillor Birch has said has been heard for the last several months, and I don't believe there's any ground to move forward, because at the end of the day, we've done this at audit, and why do we want to keep bringing up these different things? Sorry, Councillor Birch, but that's the way I feel.
So forgive me, Councillor, because I wasn't at audit. What have you done at audit that's different from what Councillor Birch is asking?
Yes, we looked at what should be done about the Ivy Bridge regeneration, and it was decided at that particular time, the recommendation was that plan and protocol be adopted for the future of any major developments.
Councillor, go on, Councillor Spurn, you come in, and then I'll come back to Councillor Birch.
I've got the actual audit recommendation here. So audit from the audit committee, there was two recommendations. First was to note the report. Second was to recommend the adoption of a planning protocol for major projects. And Mr. White has said that also on that was that be developed within the next 6 months. Now that's a recommendation to executive.
You turn your microphone off.
Oh, indeed. I would back up what Councillor Taylor is saying. I mean, the audit committee have recommended to executive that they draw up a planning protocol. Whether they wish to take on board, what Councillor Birch is talking about, it might be an option for them. But we've already got this on the table, so I think that is sufficient. There is a grave danger that we're just constantly going over the same ground.
Councillor Birch, you wanted to come back.
at the audit committee, this is something that we as a council, first of all, it's suggesting that we review the consultation and engagement strategy that this committee passed in November 2020, but also connect it with what happened at the consultation at Ivy Bridge where something went wrong. In other words, this was an area that was not investigated or even discussed by audit. So we're not going over old ground. This is really building on what this committee did on the strategy it came up with in November. So it's not it's not going over, or it's not digging up what happened before. That's number one. And number two, Councillor Smurden, you said that the audit committee said we're making a recommendation to the executive. No, they didn't. That was not what was passed. And in fact, I would question that they have the powers to do that within the Constitution. They did not make a recommendation to the executive. In fact, I would doubt if they have the constitutional powers to do that. So it may well be that the audit committee want to look at the planning protocol, but as far as advancing policy on that, is no provision within the Constitution for that. So that is another matter. I won't go into that, but I'm just picking you up on the point that you made, that there was a recommendation going to the executive. There isn't.
Chairman, can I ask for clarity from the officers who,
Mr. Powell.
yeah, either Mr. Powell or Mr. White, as to where this recommendation is going to sit.
Go on, Councillor Jones, go on. I'm sure Mr. Powell won't mind.
Sorry, only quickly, it's just I wasn't here in 2020 because I wasn't voted on. I actually met the young man who did all that review, because he's now changed job and works for a company called Legal in General. So I've met him several times. So I know what his review process was. And it's just certain people in Ivybridge didn't want that Aldi there. So I think it wasn't that the girls in my office desperately wanted it. People still did want the Aldi, but I think a lot of people shouted a lot harder than. So the original reports actually were right. So it's just that certain people shouted louder.
Well, I have to say, Councillor Jones, the planning committee didn't agree with you.
I know that. But there's things that should have been done differently. But anyway, so.
I'm not sure whether to come to Mr. Powell or Mr. Molyneux now.
Can I?
Mr. Molyneux.
It was just a point that thank you, Councillor Jones. The point I wanted to make was Councillor Birch is making an assumption. He keeps talking about a flawed consultation process. And that is an assumption that it's a flawed consultation process, because what you actually had was a consultation process, and then people changed their minds. And you're assuming that. I'm not disputing what you're saying as in terms of your recommendation, but you keep talking about a flawed consultation process.
I said that's a possibility. I haven't said it's a flawed consultation. That's why this should go to a task and finish group to establish whether or not that is the case, and whether or not our procedures are working correctly.
Right, Mr. Powell, there was a question from Councillor Smurden on the actual structure of what was happening with the recommendation from audit.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be helpful for Mr. White to confirm exactly what's resolved at audit, because I haven't got that in front of me. But my understanding was that the proposal was to develop a planning protocol to ensure that we had transparency where we were the applicant, to make sure the issue between being poacher and gamekeeper, for want of a better term, is addressed clearly. There's a clear Chinese wall between Mr. Brooke as the developer in this situation and myself as the person who's responsible for development management. So that was the principle. Areas around objective consultation could form part of that protocol to make sure that there was third-party transparency in terms of any engagement. So that might be a way of resolving the question being put forward by Councillor Birch.
Right. I think the only thing I'd share to Mr. Powell's update was that the committee in its debate was adamant that it needs to be a time frame on the development of the protocol. which was where the addition came in with regard to it being done within 6 months.
Councillor Foss.
Thank you, Chairman. This is more about COVID than anything else. If you remember at the very beginning, when the consultation went through, we were recommendation we went forward with Aldi. I was one of the ones who the opposition gave a lot of flack to for actually going with it. By the time we'd come through COVID and everything had totally changed, I don't think it's anything to do with the consultation or anything else. I think it's just a matter of circumstances overcoming the situation over a period of time. And as you well know, the application for planning application failed, and it was never looked at as to whether it would be financially viable. But I suspect with the way the interest rates changed, it wasn't going to be, and circumstances changed cases. And I don't think it's anything about flaws or anything. I think it's just what we've been through. It's dramatically changed everything, and I think this is just, to be quite blunt, navel gazing.
Okay, well, I mean, I suppose the thing that one could say is that you may well be right, but that in itself could be seen to be an assumption in much the same way that the consultation was flawed is also an assumption, you know, and I suppose what Councillor Birch is asking us to do is to undertake something in time, within time that audit have proposed for the planning protocol that would check that, wouldn't it? That would check A, whether the consultation was correct, B, whether it worked in consultation with our engagement strategy, and C, whether therefore we've learnt to move on. I suppose that would be the argument in return, wouldn't it?
Do you not think that rather than going over something that's dead in the water, it would be better to get on with moving forward rather than looking backwards, as is this case? I think you say it's an assumption, but I'm pretty sure if I was to ask many members in this room, that assumption that I've said is pretty close to the truth. And I just honestly think that it is going over old things, and we need to get on and look forward rather than backwards.
All I would say is that we are called Scrutiny, and there is always a place for scrutiny in a scrutiny panel.
Wouldn't disagree with that.
Councillor Rowe.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, I endorse everything that Councillor Foss said, because that was actually what I said at the audit and governance meeting last week when it was held. And we're going back over old ground, and I don't know what Councillor Birch hopes to achieve, but I would ask ourselves, do we actually have the staffing and officers who are able to help us with this review, which we want to report back by the 12th of January, because that's not very long, and plus the fact that we've got Christmas in the way too. So I doubt that we would be able to get a meeting together and get all the facts together, whatever facts you want to find, by that time. I just think that we're taking up too much time, wasting time, going back over old ground. We need to move forward. We've learnt our lesson and we'll carry on from there. Thank you.
Okay, I'm not going to ask you what the lesson we've learned is, Councillor Rowe, because I don't think that will be fair at this stage. What I am going to do is ask Mr White to actually come back to the question we were talking about a moment ago, which is what's the actual recommendation, Mr White? Is it to go to executive, or is it to, because there was some question about that.
I've just checked the draft committee minutes, and it says, I quote, resolved that the project closure report be noted, and part 2, that the adoption of planning protocol for major projects be recommended and to be developed within the next 6 months.
So it doesn't say to whom it is recommended?
No, it's just that's a resolution of the audit committee.
So what happens to that recommendation then? If it isn't specified as where it's going, where will it go?
As drafted, Chair.
I'm just very aware Councillor Foss has already used the phrase navel gazing. It would be slightly unfortunate if it transpires that what audit produces is a similar operation.
Will that not have to be ratified at full council? So it's going to come before. It will be.
When those minutes are ratified.
That's where that will land up.
I think whether or not it's a thing for full council depends whether it's considered to be a new policy or whether it's just new guidance for operational purposes. That's something we can take advice from David Fairburn and come back to members to confirm, but it clearly will go through the correct decision-making route.
Does anyone else like to say anything?
Yeah.
I think I need a second.
Okay, well, I'm going to well, I can see two hands over there. You've got a second and a third. I'm going to put. Yeah, I'm kinder to you, Councillor Smurden, than others in other places. Okay. What did you want to say?
Just in a spirit of, which might have passed, but a spirit of cooperation, conciliation. Mr. Powell, who's by the sound of it, as far as we can tell, is going to oversee this or is going to have sight of it. Can you mentioned about encompassing some of Councillor Birch's concerns within what has already been proposed by audit. Can you reassure him that you will do that?
What I said, and hopefully I'll repeat it, is that within the development of the planning protocol, we could include something that says that to ensure that there is transparency for the public when we are both the applicant and the decision maker, that we would undertake consultation with a third party. I didn't commit to reviewing any previous decisions around the Ivy Bridge application.
No, but here is, I will come to you, Councillor Rose, but here is a question then, that you are a director of the council. If you are involved in a project that involves consultation with the public, do you now follow the consultation and engagement strategy? Was that strategy formally adopted that came from an ONS task and finished and went to executive? Is that now a document that you would use as a director?
Yes, it is, Chair.
Councillor Rose.
So I chaired that particular task and finish group, and I would be very interested to see how that's being applied. I find it, I have to support the comment from the chairman saying, scrutiny in a scrutiny panel. If we worked very hard over several meetings to create that document, and there is now a situation that has arisen. This situation in Ivy Bridge is obviously incredibly complex, and there has been an about turn in opinion. The reasons we're not sure. I just think that from the process of creating that document and examining the council's, old way of consulting with communities, the reason that task and finish group was set up was because we weren't doing it very well. It needed upgrading seriously, and I think that it's a shortfall that is probably common for most councils, is how to engage with people who are on the outside. It's like you work within a kind of silo really as a council, and that was very much that was really clear in the process of creating that engagement strategy, that it was really hard to engage with community. So for me, I just think that the more we can improve on how we do that, we're actually going to be saving ourselves a lot more time in the future when we go ahead, do a consultation process, maybe don't get the whole, that process that happened in Ivy Bridge. Okay, you're saying that there are, a lot of people want it, but then other people are shouting louder. Maybe if we had reached more people in the first instance, we wouldn't then have this situation where other people are coming in and shouting louder. Perhaps we could be engaging with the whole of the community from the first instance, and therefore saving ourselves that time in the long run. So even though I haven't said this very succinctly, I very much support this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Rose. Before we vote on this, I'm going to go to Councillor Pearce. Councillor Pearce.
Just a couple of questions on this. First of all, it's unclear to me. I realise it was a task and finish group, and this went to overview and scrutiny and was no doubt voted through. My question is, what happened to the consultation and engagement strategy, if that's what it was, or was it a policy, or what was it after that? And when was this again? Because we think it could have post-dated the initial decision to go out to consultation in Ivy Bridge, because I'm not sure of the dates, and I'm also not sure of the destination of that and what status that policy or strategy had beyond overview and scrutiny and a task and finish group.
Well, on that latter point, Councillor Pearce, that was the point I was asking Mr Powell, because I thought it had gone to the executive to be adopted. Councillor Birch can certainly answer the other question. He's champing at the bit so to do. So go on, Councillor.
It's interesting. I'm glad that Councillor Pearce has raised that point, because I I trawled through all the minutes of the overview and scrutiny and looked when the recommendation to the executive, when the consultation and engagement strategy was approved by ONS, and as I say, it was on the 19th of November 2020, and it clearly said within the recommendation coming from OS that it needed to go to the executive for approval. And then I trawled through the executive committee meetings, and lo and behold, it seemed to have got lost in the long grass. So it may well be that ONS, at the request of the executive, and the executive member was heavily involved in the strategy formation, that after ONS, it disappeared. And it may well be that, in fact, all the hard work that was put in by Councillor Rose and his task and finish group has not yet reached the agenda of the executive. So perhaps this is a good time for us to perhaps, if that is the case, and I may be wrong, but if that is the case, then now is a good time for us to actually revisit that strategy, update it if possible, and in doing that, take into account what happened at Ivybridge, and then make certain that it does go, that the revised or the consultation engagement strategy does actually go to the executive for consideration.
Mr. Brooke.
Forgive me for joining this extended debate.
No, you are very welcome, Mr. Brooke. Everyone else is having a go, so you may as well join in.
I just thought we should I just have some factual questions really, just to ponder. So I couldn't agree more with the comments made earlier that engaging with communities is really difficult. It absolutely is. And I would be biased, and I expect to be accused of that. But this was an outlier and an exemplar by way of consultation with the community. And if you want to look into it, go crazy, because it was really good. However, my question is, given that the Task and Finish group did its review on engagement at least 6 months after we had done the biggest engagement we'd ever done, did it or did it not pick up lessons learned at that time? And have we not therefore already done this? And if we haven't, I feel like we've missed an opportunity.
My recollection of sitting on that Task and Finish, Mr. Brooke, is that the Task and Finish group were not privy to the consultation process in Ivybridge, and therefore we couldn't learn lessons if there were lessons to be learned, or not learn lessons if there weren't lessons to be learned, because that was above our pay grade, as it were.
Can I ask the question?
Of course you may.
Sorry, Chairman.
No, of course.
Did you actually already have a Task and Finish group which was looking into consultations, etc.?
Yes, absolutely. Yes, that's what Councillor Birch is saying. On the 19th of November 2020, the Task and Finish group reported back to the Overview and Scrutiny panel with the results of its recommendations, which were received and agreed by ONS. It was then supposed to go to the executive for adoption or not, as the case may be. I think what we've discovered today is that never happened. That's the issue.
So this is the Task and Finish group, which was chaired by Councillor Rose.
Correct.
Right, okay, thank you. So that makes it even more.
It makes it more complicated than it was before, I'm afraid. Yes, it does. It does. Right, members, I think you've heard where we've gone with this. We had a Task and Finish group on consultation, which was chaired by Councillor Rose, which we went through. The committee agreed and sent to exec. For whatever reason, never got to exec. Councillor Birch is now asking that we review that process, well, not that process specifically, the consultation process, the adopted consultation engagement strategy, which isn't adopted, in fact. So we shouldn't have the word adopted, Darryl, actually, because it isn't adopted by the sound of things. It does. It says that the Task and Finish group be sent to review the council's adopted. It's never actually been adopted by the council, I'm afraid, we've discovered. And as part of this review, the consultation process or annotation for Ivybridge regeneration be reviewed, with the conclusions reached by the group then reported about the committee meeting. So that was proposed by Councillor Birch. It was seconded either by Councillor McKay or Councillor Rose. You choose, Mr. White, because they both put their hands up. And I think we're probably now ready to go, unless anyone tells me otherwise, to a vote on that, members. Okay? So I hope everyone's still with me on that. It's been quite a confusing half an hour, but that's where we are. So those in favour, please, of the resolution as displayed on the screen, please show.
That's 6 in favour, thank you, Chair.
And those against?
6 against, thank you, Chair.
Abstentions?
With 1 abstention, thank you, Chair.
Okay, well, I will use my casting vote to carry the resolution then.
Thank you.
And it is as such carried. Okay, there we are. So there will be a task and finish group as described on that screen, which will primarily now be reviewing the consultation and engagement strategy that hasn't actually been adopted. But we will also, as per the terms on the screen, we are still in meeting, members.
Councillor Rosie's task and finish must be in paper form somewhere.
Yes.
Yes. So they need to redig that out.
Yes.
Yeah. Right.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. But no, what I'm saying is it would be silly to just have another task and finish. We've got to dig that back.
No, absolutely. No, completely agree. That's that will be the starting point. That was the starting point. And I will ask, and I will email leaders and ask them for politically appropriately balanced representation on that task and finish. Okay. I think that is it for today, members. So I will thank you all very much. And at 22 minutes past 4, I will say the meeting is adjourned.